Hi everybody, here is your video lecture for Chapter 12. And in Chapter 12 we're going to be discussing basically how demanding and stressful it is to be a teacher and how being a teacher can affect your health and happiness in life. So for this lecture we are going to talk about stress. We're going to go into a little bit about the biology of stress and then how stress can actually affect your health. We're going to talk briefly about teacher burnout, some ways of coping, and then some ways that you guys can actually protect yourself from stress. So let's get started. Alright, so stress. We have stress all the time in life, and I feel like it's especially bad this time of the year. So I want you guys to think about some of your biggest stressors right now. You know, especially with schoolwork, we're getting towards the end of the semester, things are piling down, you need to get assignments in, you're about to have finals and a project due, so that can be really stressful. And I know some of you guys, the majority of you guys, are also working full-time. I think as the majority of you guys are teachers, so or social workers or things like that, and you have your own stressors that come along with your job. And then I'm sure the majority of you guys have families as well, and we're about to, kids require a lot of time and attention. We're about to get into the holiday season, so we got Thanksgiving in less than 2 weeks, and then it's Christmas, and then we got to figure out buying Christmas gifts and things like that. So, we have stress throughout the year, but I feel like it's especially bad this time of year. So I want you guys to think about some of your biggest stressors and carry that with you as we go throughout this lecture and we talk about some ways to cope and some ways to protect yourself from the negative effects of stress. So keep those stressors in mind. All right, so let's actually define stress. And when I talk about stress, I'm talking about this tension, discomfort, or physical symptoms that arise when you have a situation that you're having trouble coping with. So, for example, I'm hosting Thanksgiving lunch for our family this year, and I keep thinking about how it's less than 2 weeks, so I've got to clean the house, get all the food ready, things like that. And when I start thinking about it, I don't cope with it very well right now because I'm just starting to think about all the things that I have to do. And so when I start to think about them, I start to get that tension in my body and that discomfort and kind of that anxiety seeping up. And that response is what we refer to as stress. Now, the Thanksgiving dinner is what we refer to as the stressor. So keep in mind, I'm going to be talking about stressors and then stress. Stressors is the stimulus or the stimuli in the environment that serve as a source of the stress. And then that discomfort, that tension in your body, those physical discomfort responses, that's the actual stress. So stressors are the pressure from the outside, and then stress is your response to those stressors. We typically have 3 classes of stressors. The first one are microstressors, and these are just those daily hassles in life, so getting stuff in traffic, deadlines, annoyances from either your partner or your family or your kids, things like that, just those everyday daily hassles, going to a parking lot and finding a parking spot, things like that. And then we have major negative life events. And these are major things that happen in your life that require lots of efforts to cope with, and they place a lot more demands on us. And this can be something like death of a parent, losing your job, divorce, things like that really impact your life negatively and really require you to cope with them. And then the last class are what we call catastrophic events. And these events are unexpected, and they often affect a large population of people. So, for example, Hurricane Katrina a long time ago, or Hurricane Harvey that hit Houston a couple years ago. And then more recently, Hurricane Laura that hit Lake Charles. All those are referred to as those catastrophic events. I did want to point out that when we talk about stress is in the eye of the beholder. So something that is stressful for you may not be stressful for me, and something that's stressful for me may not be stressful for you. So I'm trying to think, I don't really care when I make plans with somebody and that person is late. But my mom, for example, if she makes plans for somebody and they're late, it's a a lot more stressful for her. So keep that in mind. It is in the eye of the beholder. And also, you can have a couple of micro stressors that can actually add up to be a major negative event. For example, we're getting close to finals, so you guys might have one final, which might be a micro stressor. But when you get to finals week and you have 4 finals within 2 days, then that might actually become a major negative life event. So keep that in mind. Those micro stressors can combine to be something that impacts you in a major negative way and requires a lot of efforts to cope. So let's get into some of the biology of stress. And the only thing that I really wanted to point out about the biology is I wanted you guys to be aware of something called the HPA axis. So H means hypothalamus, P means pituitary, and A means the adrenal cortex. So basically what happens is when we're presented with a stressor, our hypothalamus is alerted. So I'm going to go back and forth. So this kind of lays it out for you guys in a linear way, and this is a visualization of this HPA axis. So we have a stressor, and our hypothalamus gets alerted. And the hypothalamus is actually what keeps our body at homeostasis. So when our hypothalamus gets alerted, it activates our pituitary gland. Our pituitary gland then secretes ACTH, which activates our adrenal cortex. And then our adrenal cortex activates a bunch of different stress hormones. And we get a physiological response. So we get a raise in our body temperature, increased heart rate, etc. And our adrenal cortex releases what we call cortisol. So cortisol is one of the major stress hormones. And small amounts of cortisol are good. Like I said, it gives you that raise in body temperature, that increased heart rate. It gives you the energy to deal with the stressor, which is awesome. Also in this HPA axis, it has what we call a negative feedback loop. So once the adrenal cortex is producing cortisol, and it gets to a specific level, basically it kind of restores itself, our body restores itself back to homeostasis. So it alerts the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and the adrenal cortex will stop producing cortisol and we'll go back to normal levels. So great, this is how it's supposed to work. But what happens is a lot of times our stressors just keep coming. And when our body gets overloaded with cortisol, it essentially, this HPA axis becomes less sensitive to this negative feedback loop. And this HPA axis just continues to pump cortisol out and doesn't actually stop cortisol from producing. And when we have high levels of cortisol, that's when we can get those negative effects on our health. High levels of cortisol result in digestive problems, increases in sugar levels, weight gain, increase in blood pressure, and things like that. So on the surface, when we have a little bit of stress, our HPA axis is awesome. It activates cortisol, which allows us to take care of the stressor, and then it's supposed to go back to normal levels with this feedback loop. But when we have too much stress, the cortisol levels kind of overflood this feedback loop, and this HPA axis becomes less sensitive to it, and it just keeps producing cortisol, and that's where we get those negative health outcomes. All right, so one thing that we talk about with regards to stress is how we adapt to stress and how we deal with it. And there is a researcher named Selye, and he came up with this general adaptation syndrome. And this is typically how we all kind of react to stress. And we do it in 3 levels. So first we go through an alarm phase when we get presented with stress. This is really short. This is right when you're presented with a stressor. It activates your autonomic nervous system. It activates that HPA axis, so it produces those stress hormones. Your flight or fight response is activated, and things like that. And it gives us the energy to actually deal with the stressor and take care of it. If the stressor keeps coming, then we go into what we call the resistance phase. And the resistance phase, if you guys see right here, it can last a really long time. And this is where we're trying to adapt and cope with the stressor. So the stressor doesn't go away, it keeps coming, and we're just trying to adapt and cope with it. Finally, when we've had enough and we've been adapting and coping and all of our resources have been depleted, then we get into the exhaustion phase. And this is when, like I said, all our resources are depleted. You're just exhausted. It's hard to get out of bed. You can't move. And this is when you get sick. So when you're thinking about those stressors in your life, think about where you think you fall in this model. And you can use the acronym GAS. So the general adaptation syndrome. And we have the alarm, resistance, and exhaustion phase. So think about those stressors I wanted you to think about at the very beginning. Where do you fall right here? Did you just get presented with those stressors and you're trying to deal with them? Have they been coming on for a long time and you're adapting and coping? Or have they been coming on for so long that you're just exhausted? If you're starting to get sick, then you're probably in this exhaustion phase. When all your resources are depleted, that's when you're vulnerable to getting sick, getting colds, and things like that. So if you are stressed and you've gotten a cold, then you might be in that exhaustion phase. And I also wanted to point out something that I just think is interesting. There's a really good book, if you guys like to read, and it's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's actually true. Zebras don't get ulcers. And one reason is that zebras have this same stress response as we do, except for their stressors come and they go away. So the main stressor of a zebra is a lion and them being attacked by a lion. So when they get attacked by a lion, they can either fight or they can run away. They fight and there's an outcome, or they run away and hopefully they get away from the lion, and that lion is gone. And when that lion is gone, the stressor is gone, and their whole HPA axis and their whole stress response goes back to what it's supposed to. Okay, great. That's actually how our stress response is supposed to work. So our stress response is designed so that we're presented with stressors. Our body gives us that increase in blood pressure, all those things, produces cortisol so we can deal with that stressor, and then the stressor is supposed to go away. But that's not what happens in life these days. And these days, our stressors keep coming and coming and coming, and they don't go away. And so we're not really our bodies have not evolved to deal with that. So we get into the resistance phase, and then we get into the exhaustion phase. And that's when we get that vulnerability to disease, where we get a higher risk of heart disease, ulcers, things like that. And so I think it's interesting. Our stress response and zebra stress responses are the same, are designed the same way. And zebra stressors, they go away. Their main stressor is a lion. So once they take care of it or get away from it, it goes away. And so they actually don't get ulcers. Our stressors don't go away, and our system isn't really apt to deal with that. So we get into these resistance and exhaustion phases and causes us to get ulcers and be vulnerable to disease. So if you guys are interested in any of that, it's a really good book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, if you guys are interested in stress. Okay, so long-term effects of stress. Remember, stress is good on the short term. So when we have a stressor, our body produces that cortisol. It allows us to deal with the stressor. It becomes a problem when those stressors don't go away. So in this example, short-term effect, you get that increase in heart rate to have you deal with the stressor. However, if that increase in heart rate lasts for the long term, then you have a higher risk of developing heart disease. Increase in blood pressure, good for the short term. If it happens long term, you develop hypertension and things like that. Short-term effects, protein breakdown for energy. Long-term effect, you get muscle and immune depletion. Short-term effect, your digestion gets postponed. And long-term effect, you get those ulcers and the weight change. And then some other ones that you can look at as well. So short-term effect, that alarm stage, that's good for us. It's when the stressor does not go away after the alarm phase and we get into the resistance and then the exhaustion phase, that we get those long-term negative outcomes dealing with stress. Okay, so let's look further into the effects of stress on our health. And I have a video for you guys in your module about how stress can actually kill you. And it talks about a bunch of cool things in that video. It's pretty short. So I wanted to give a shout out to that so you guys remember to watch it. But long-term effects of stress, we've already talked about this a little bit in the previous slide. But basically, remember your HPA axis secretes those stress hormones. The main one we talked about was cortisol, but there are some other ones. And they in turn weaken your immune system and increase your risk for cancer, heart disease, diabetes, smoking, alcohol, drug use. You guys can see all these that are stress effects on the body. So you're more likely to get migraines, hypertension, sleep deprivation, fatigue, depression, diarrhea, acid reflux, an eating disorder, hives, vaccine, all those things. And all those things are risk factors for the 5 leading causes of death. And the number 1 leading cause is heart disease, which is inadvertently caused by stress. So keep that in mind. Short-term stress, good. Long-term stress can have some really negative effects on your health. I have a rating scale for you guys to do in the module, and so I hope you guys actually go and do it. This is the social readjustment rating scale, and so basically your directions are that you're going to take the last year, and within the past year you're going to check off each time any of these things have happened to you. And then if it's happened to you twice, you're going to take that. So say you got married twice, you're going to have 100 times 2, so you're going to have 200 points for that one. So check it off. If it's happened twice, count it twice, and then you're going to add up and find a total. If you're at a score of 300 plus, you are at a high risk of getting an illness. If you have 150 to 299, you have a moderate risk of getting an illness. And then 150 and below, a slight risk. So go ahead, take this, assess your scale, assess your stressors in life, and make sure that you know where you stand on how much of a risk you are for actually developing an illness. Okay, let's talk about teacher burnout quickly. Teacher burnout is huge. Within the first year, the statistics are about 40% of teachers quit, and it's even worse with special education. And they show that 50% of special education teachers leave within 5 years. So this is huge. It is so hard to come in and be a teacher, especially a teacher for kids with emotional and behavioral disorders. So that adds a whole new level of stress. Some other factors that affect it is that special education teachers have to be highly qualified. So some legislation has required teachers to be highly qualified, but a lot of teachers come in, and we have general ed teachers that have kids with EBD in their classroom. Some teachers, even special ed teachers, come in and they've gotten an alternate certification and things like that, and they just haven't gone through the schoolwork to actually have tools and strategies in their belt to deal with kids that have emotional and behavior disorder. And it can be hard when you're not set up for success. So if you don't have those tools and you don't know how to deal with kids with EBD, it can be a huge stressor. And there are some other factors that go into it. Working conditions, having support from administration. A lot of times special ed teachers feel like they don't have support from administration, that they don't have the supplies that they need and things like that. And also, a lot of times they feel like they don't have the respect and acceptance that they really need. It's hard being a special ed teacher, but a lot of times they feel like kind of the stepchild compared to the gen ed teachers, which can be hard. So they oftentimes don't feel supported. They don't feel like they're set up for success. They don't feel support from administration and things like that. If you are experiencing teacher burnout, here are some symptoms. So if you're feeling attacked, you don't want to go to school, you have headaches, you're having digestive issues, you can't concentrate, anxiety, depression, you avoid people. So you see other teachers or students in the hall and you avoid them. You dread going to work, you don't support your school. Things like that are all symptoms of teacher burnout. And the research shows that increased stress lowers teacher burnout, increases your stress, it lowers your job satisfaction, and it reduces your commitment to the teacher profession, which all in all means that you are not going to help and teach your students as much as you should, so your students are really going to suffer as well as you. So being aware of teacher burnout, the symptoms, how possible and how common it is really, really important. It's hard to be a teacher in general, and even harder to be a special ed teacher, especially when you have kids with emotional behavior disorders. So it can be really, really tough. Okay, so let's talk about some coping strategies really quickly. First thing I want to talk about is it's really important how you actually appraise the situation with regards to stress. And so we have what we call primary appraisals and secondary appraisals. So I kind of want to go through this little chart with you guys. So you have a stressor that comes in, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to engage in a primary appraisal. So this is how you're going to cognitively think about the stress. You're going to interpret the stressor. Is it a positive stressor? Is it dangerous? Does it produce a threat to your well-being? Is it harmful to you? Is it going to cause you to lose something? Or is it irrelevant? If it's dangerous, so if it's positive, cool. If it's irrelevant, no big deal. But if it's dangerous, if it threatens your well-being, if it's a big deal to you, then you're going to go into these secondary appraisals. So you're going to have this cognitive analysis of your available resources, and you're going to try to figure out, do I have the resources to deal with this stressor? If you do, then cool, you got it. If you don't, then you're going to start to see that stress response come out, that tension, that physical discomfort, things like that, that anxiety, all that is going to come up. So first, when you're, so for example, say you're going to campus and you get stuck in a traffic jam. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, is this threatening my well-being? You're going to go through those primary appraisers. Is this a threat? Is this going to harm me? And you're probably going to think about your class. Do I have an exam today? Is there anything going on in class today? If there's no exam and you think that you know the material anyways, then it might be irrelevant. It might not be a big deal to you. But if there's an exam, then you're going to really start to get stressed, because that's a huge deal if you can't get to your exam. If it is dangerous and a threat, so say you have that exam and you can't get there, then you're going to go into your secondary appraisals. So you're going to say, okay, what are my resources? Am I able to get to the exam? Is there some way that I can take care of this? If you have sufficient resources, so maybe you know a way around the traffic, or you're about to be at an exit and you can exit and go around the traffic, then hey, you're good, awesome. But if you don't have any significant any resources to deal with the situation, then you're just going to start to feel that stress and anxiety, and you're going to freak out. So that's what we mean by primary and secondary appraisals. How do you interpret the stressor, and then do you have the available resources? And so this is just another representation of it. You got the situation or event. You're going to go through your primary appraisals. Is there a threat? Is this harmful? Do I need to be concerned about it? If no, cool, then no stress. If yes, you're going to think about your secondary appraisals, and do you have the resources to cope with a threat? If yes, then good, you can cope with it. If no, then that's when you get that negative stress, that anxiety, discomfort, things like that. Okay, also, when we talk about resources and if we have the availability of resources, with those secondary appraisals, control is a huge issue. So the more control you can have over the situation, the less stressful that you'll become. And so I hope you guys remember this. If you can gain any type of control over the situation, then it really decreases that stress. And it doesn't matter what it is. There are different types of control. So there's informational control. For example, if you go into surgery, the more information that you can find about your surgery and what's going to go on in that room, the more control you have and the less stressed you are. So if you know this is what the doctor is going to be doing, this is what happens when I go in, and things like that, then your stress level decreases. if you can make a choice, so you have some control in the choices that you make, that can decrease stress as well. So when you guys are thinking about schools and what classes to take, a lot of times you have choices between different professors, and just providing that choice where you can go in and look at the professors. If you've had them before, you can choose which professor you want, can really decrease the anxiety of taking a new course or not knowing what to expect in a course. So all those things that you can do, if you just feel completely out of control, find something that you can control, and it really decreases that stress. Okay, so a couple different coping strategies I want to talk about, and they all kind of revolve around control. The more control you have, the more likely you are to be able to cope with the stress and the emotions. So different coping strategies. The first one is problem-focused coping. So this is when you can actively engage in a behavior to decrease or to take away the stressor or to decrease the stressor, which then in turn decreases your stress. So for example, if you look at Blackboard and you feel that you got a bad grade, well, problem-focused coping would actually be emailing the professor and seeing if there's anything that you can do to help that grade. You engage in a behavior that could hopefully reduce that stressor. So problem-focused coping, active coping, and problem solving. And with all of these, there are good ways to do it and there are bad ways to do it. So keep that in mind. There are good ways for problem-focused coping. There are bad ways for problem-focused coping. Emotion-focused coping is when you focus on dealing with your emotions. So, thinking about your emotions more positively, accepting them, things like that. And this could be something like, talking these things out with your friends, just anything that you can do, journal writing, things like that, to deal with those emotions. Like I said, there are healthy ways to do this. You can work out, you can talk with friends, things like that. And then there are bad ways to do this. So you can deal with your emotions through drinking, drug use, and things like that. The next one is seeking social support, and this is really, really important. So seeking out friends to help you and guide you, having friends give you that emotional support to help you with that emotion-focused coping, and things like that. If you can do something to control the situation, then a lot of times you use problem-focused coping, deal with the situation, get it done. If you don't have control over the situation, then you have to go into this emotion-focused coping and just deal with your emotions. For example, I gave you guys the example of the bad grade. Well, you can use problem-focused coping. You can email your professor. You can study harder. There are behaviors that you can engage in to reduce that stressor or to decrease that stressor and make it go away. But if you have something like, like a breakup, you can't. Sometimes you can engage in behaviors that can make them take you back, but you can't force somebody to be in a relationship with you. And so sometimes you have to just deal with your emotions and figure out how to take the loss and move on. Okay, so let's talk about briefly how we can protect ourselves. A couple different ways. Some things, researchers have identified kind of 4 main things that you can do to help protect yourself from the negative outcomes of stress. So first one, don't smoke. I know smoking is helpful. It decreases anxiety sometimes, but it's very bad for your health, and it is very bad it also sometimes increases the stress and things like that. Also, don't drink. Smoking and drinking are ways that you can cope. Those are emotion-based coping methods that are really negative and have negative effects on your health. Some things that you can do that are great for you is exercise. So they show if you get outside between 3 or 4 times a week and just do something, even walk, anything like that, that can have really good effects on your health. It decreases stress. It decreases risk for dementia when you get older. All those things. It increases your cognitive ability. So exercise is really important. And like I said, you don't have to take it to a weird place and have these really intense workouts every day, but just 3 to 4 times a week, get out there and walk. If you're sitting around watching Netflix, turn it off, get up and do something, and don't just sit in bed all day and kind of watch Netflix. And the last thing is eating healthy. So what you put in your body really affects your behavior, your emotions, how you deal with stress, and things like that. It just keeps you healthier. So don't smoke, don't drink. Those have negative effects on your health. And then work out and eat healthy. Another thing that you can do to help protect yourself is same thing we talked about with the coping mechanisms, but have social support. Social support is huge. And actually, when you have some type of social support, your body produces a hormone called oxytocin. And this is oftentimes called the cuddle hormone. But oxytocin is amazing. And oxytocin actually protects your heart from the negative effects of stress, which is so interesting. So if you guys are stressed, reach out to somebody, get those social support networks. And those social support networks allow your body to release oxytocin, which protects you from the negative outcomes of stress, which is amazing. So I have a TED Talk for you guys to watch, and she talks about this. And it's just so cool how your body has this built-in system to counteract the negative effects of stress. So use it. When you guys get stressed, reach out to people, your family, your friends, laugh with somebody else, go do something with somebody else. Reach out to those social avenues because they can be really helpful and protect you. And then the last thing, your chapter talks about a lot of different things that you guys can do as teachers to make sure that you take care of yourself. And I like this little picture over here. It talks about the different types of self-care. So physical, emotional, social, spiritual, professional, space, financial, work. And it gives a lot of different things that can help you guys take care of yourself. And your book talks about 3 main categories. So social development, those support groups, like I said, they produce that oxytocin. It protects you from stress and burnout and things like that. So find a teacher that you really trust and connect with, that you can vent to, especially if you're working with kids with EBD, really stressful, and they can kind of get under your skin. So having that support group where it's non-judgmental and you can just vent is really great. Having a life outside the classroom. So doing something fun that has nothing to do with teaching, go do it. Go to yoga class, go look at art, whatever it is that you like to do. Make sure that you have a life outside the classroom. Learn to say no. Take your vacations. Take courses. That stimulates your brain. But I do have to say, make sure that you don't overload yourself if you're taking courses. Because if you're a teacher, you're working full-time, so don't overload yourself. And I would oftentimes suggest that you take courses on something fun. I don't know. A lot of colleges have those continuing education courses. They can teach you how to knit or pottery or something like that. Something that just kind of allows you to leave work at work and for you to do something for you. That can be really important. Your mental development, keep those synapses firing. Use it or lose it. So keep that brain working, but not with your work stuff, something else, something to give yourself a break, but still keeps that mental development up. So crossword puzzles, Sudoku, music, meditation is huge. Taking, which I know we're all so busy and it's so hard to do, but maybe just a couple of minutes, 5 minutes each day before you go to bed, and just breathe. Breathe and focus on your breathing and just slow down and meditate can be so important. And also reading. And I would suggest that you guys don't read anything that has to do with teaching or schoolwork. Read something fun. I love Mary Higgins Clark novels, but I have to be careful because I'll stay up till 4 or 5 actually reading those, and I have trouble going to sleep. But pick something, read it for fun. When I was in grad school, I had one of my professors tell me, which I really loved him and really respect him, but he told all of us that when we're in grad school, we shouldn't be reading anything besides journal articles and stuff for school. And I see his point, because once you stop reading those, because you kind of get in the zone and you want to stay in the zone throughout grad school. But you also need this balance in your mental development. And so I'm a huge supporter for reading something besides your school, or kind of take a break, read something fun. And then that physical development, which we've already talked about, so exercise and eating healthy. And then you guys can look at this as well. I just think this has some really good suggestions. So, physical, make sure you're sleeping right, you're walking, you're eating healthy, you do yoga, you're resting when you can. Your emotional development, make sure that you have kindness, compassion, forgiveness, social communication, social support, time together, spiritual, meditation, yoga, connecting to nature, journaling, if you like to write. Those are great things. I think it was your book talked about, which I think this is a great idea. If you have a stressful day, write everything down on a piece of paper that was stressful and then throw it in the trash. Get rid of it. Personal hobbies, knowing yourself, your personal identity, making sure that you have enough space, that you're managing your money, you're paying your bills, things like that. And then with work, time management, boundaries, that's what we're talking about with life outside the classroom. More learning, so taking those courses, helping yourself learn. Sorry guys. And then providing breaks as well. And I want to leave you guys with one final thing that has helped me so much going through grad school and being a teacher and just dealing with stress in life. It's just trying to find a balance, and it's not perfect, and the scales go up and down, but just trying to find a balance between making sure you work and you have time for yourself and you have time for your family and you have time to meditate and you have time to work out. So looking at life and just managing your time and finding that balance, it's challenging. You get stressful at the end of the semester, and all of your cognitive ability and time goes into school, but really finding that balance and taking care of yourself, making sure that you hit all those developments, social, mental, physical. It's always a work in process. And so I just urge you guys to really take a step back and find a balance in life, whatever your balance may be, that keeps you mentally, physically, and socially and professionally healthy. So, all right, guys, there is a TED Talk on your module, and I just wanted to briefly talk about it here, but this is one of my favorite TED Talks. She talks about stress and how it's so important how we perceive stress. And every time I get stressed in the semester, I end up watching this TED Talk, and it just kind of, restores my thinking about stress and things like that. And she brings up oxytocin, like we talked about, and just some ways to look at stress and some research that she's done on stress that is just really cool. All right, so we talked about stress and stressors, the 3 classes of stressors, those microstressors, major negative life events, and then those catastrophic events. We talked about our HPA axis and cortisol. We talked about the general adaptation syndrome. We have the alarm, resistance, and exhaustion phase. We talked about the long-term effects of stress. Remember, short-term effects of stress, good. We need those. We need our body to release cortisol to deal with those stressors, but it's the long-term effects of stress that give us those negative health outcomes. We talked about teacher burnout, primary and secondary appraisals. So when you first start presented with a stressor, you're going to go into those primary appraisals. Is this a threat to my well-being? Is this important? And then if it is, you're going to go into the secondary. Do I have the resources to cope with this? We also talked about control. So the more control you have over the situation in whatever way, the less your stress response will be. We talked about some coping strategies, so problem-based, emotion-based, and that social support. And then we talked about how to protect yourself from stress. So eating good, exercising, not drinking, not smoking, and then all those other things, doing crossword puzzles, taking your vacation, yoga, meditation, journaling, all those different things can just help you cope and help you protect yourself from stress. And the main thing is that social support, because it produces that hormone oxytocin, which really does protect yourself from those negative health outcomes due to stress. So, alright guys, if you have any questions about this lecture or anything in the chapter, then please let me know. Thanks guys.